It's officially dead. At least that's what some people are saying after a recent news update in regards to the current state of Overwatch happened earlier this week. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what Overwatch is by some chance, it's a hero shooter that's been out for a while now. It's been out since May of 2016, and when it originally launched, it came out for the Xbox One, PS4, PC, before later being brought to the Switch. And then last year, getting a sequel announced for all current gen consoles, the Switch and PC. Since its launch, it's gained a lot of fans. A lot of people love the game. They view it as a very also competitive, but also fun and enjoyable game to play. It's got a very active Twitch streamer and viewer base, and ever since its launch, has gotten tons of map updates and characters brought into the game. That being said, though, as time has gone on, from the original game's launch in 2016, player count has had issues with dipping, going throughout any given year. Lots of controversies with how characters have been balanced, how certain characters would play, to very large controversies with one of the voice actors that was featured in the game. The original games just had issues. But for the most part, it's been a fun game with lots of cool game modes and different things that has honestly made it an enjoyable esports game to watch if you're not interested in playing it yourself. Now, that kind of changed last year. Last year, it was basically announced that we would be getting Overwatch 2. Overwatch 2 is the sequel to the game, and what was cool about it when they announced it, when you have Call of Duty, and when Call of Duty comes out every year, you have to start over from scratch. You have to buy all your new skins, all the maps are different, progression normally, if it is brought over, it's only from the last year, it's not brought over from years prior. So normally, it's a big grind. But what Activision was doing with Overwatch 2 was they were like, hey, you played Overwatch 1, you bought this skin, it's coming over. You played on this map, that map is coming over. They had such a cool idea of just migrating everything over so that people who liked the original Overwatch could still keep playing it and enjoying it. And they were like, and not only are we going to bring everything over, but we're going to start adding a whole bunch of additional content to make it an even better game than it already is. And they were like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to breathe a bunch of fresh air. And then on top of it, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce something called PvE. For anyone who doesn't know what PvE is, PvE stands for player versus enemy. So think of it as like standard traditional campaign. You know, you're fighting off against waves of enemies, or you're fighting off against the computer, so on and so forth. It's pretty much a story mode, okay? They were like, we're going to go out and we're going to have this really cool story mode for the game, which we never got in Overwatch 1. Overwatch 1 was just a multiplayer-only game. And they're like, it's going to not only have all these new updates, but it's also going to have this PvE. PvE is a lot of the reason why people got excited for this game. It's an exciting thing to have in a game when you never had it before. Think back to like Titanfall to Titanfall 2. One of the cool things that we got in Titanfall 2 was we got essentially a PvE. Now, the announcement, everyone's really excited. We're like, holy crap. Now, that being said, as you get closer to the launch, people are starting to lose interest, or they're starting to get upset. Now, why do I say that? Right around the launch of the game, some issues started appearing for the game. Activision made a requirement that you basically had to have a postpaid phone number, which is basically going through AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, maybe if you're a Sprint customer still. Here in the States, you had to have a phone number linked to your Activision Blizzard account. You couldn't go through a prepaid carrier like Boost Mobile, Mint Mobile. You couldn't use one of those. And basically their reasoning for doing this was to try and prevent cheaters. One of the really big issues that Overwatch 1 had was that there were a lot of cheaters in the game. So they're like, okay, we're going to go and put in this requirement. You got to have this if you want to play the game. A lot of people got upset about that because even in 2023, 2022, 2021, whatever year you're talking about, it's still very common for people to have prepaid phone numbers. Why is that? Because they're substantially cheaper. You know, my prepaid phone number is like $40 a month, but my actual phone bill on my other phone is almost 80, 100. You know, it's like a lot of people go with them, especially people of lower income families. You know, you can't go out and spend $90 on a phone, so you skip and go with whatever you can get for the cheapest. Now, eventually that died out. It was an annoyance, but a lot of people either got over it or they just didn't play the game. Since then, there have been other issues that have been cropping up for the game. You know, small little tweaks and changes, you know, characters being fucked up when they launched the game, so on and so forth. Now, the biggest by far, and just the thing that amazes me the most, the biggest issue that they've had with Overwatch 2 actually just got announced this last week. Basically, they came out and they announced on Monday during a live stream talking about the future of the game's content that they were going to be, unfortunately, canceling the future development of the PvE game mode. During the live stream, the future roadmap was being spoken about by a bunch of different people, but one of the biggest people that they had for it was the executive producer, Jared Neusis. I believe that's how his name pronounced. But he basically went out and said, quote, "The development on the PvE experience hasn't made the progress that we had hoped. And that, quote, the team had created a bunch of amazing content, so there's awesome missions that are really exciting. There's brand new enemies that are super fun to fight, and some truly great and ridiculous hero talents. But unfortunately, the effort required to pull all of that into a Blizzard quality experience that we can ship to you is huge. There really is no end in sight or definite kind of end date when we can put that out into the world." End quote. Basically, what you're hearing in this type of conversation, it's never really a good sign, unfortunately, because it's pretty much saying the game's canceled. And Jared does go on to say that, quote, "And so we are left with the difficult choice. Do we continue to pour all of that effort into PvE, hoping that we can land it in some point in the future? Or do we stick with this set of values that we have aligned on and focus on the live game and focusing on serving all of you? With everything we have learned about what it takes to operate this game at the level that you deserve, it's clear that we can't deliver on the original version of the PvE that was shown in 2019. What that means is that we won't be delivering that dedicated hero mode with talent trees, that long-term talent, power progression, so on and so forth." End quote. Hearing that they've canceled this is yet another feature that promised that they're just not including in the game. Now, I've never been the biggest Overwatch player. I don't normally watch Overwatch, but sometimes I'll turn on a game of it. And like when I was a kid, I used to rent it from my local game store a bunch and just play it whenever, like, you know, I wanted, you know, something mindless to do where I was just having fun. Hearing that they're not going to be developing the PvE is actually really upsetting because that game mode sounded so exciting, and honestly, I would have spent money on it. Even if it was a free-to-play experience, I would have poured money into the game. It sounded so good, and it sounded like it was going to be a bunch of fun. Sadly, that's not the case anymore. I do understand their reasonings for what they did. I'm not saying that I'm not an understanding person. I do understand it. You know, if you only have 100 people on your team and you have 2 different projects and both projects require 100 different people, you have to pick or choose which project you actually work on. I get it. That being said, though, over the last decade and a half, it's become really a norm for these game releases to be half baked and promised, and basically not even be a full game right out of the gate. It's not a bad thing if like you release a game and then you're like, oh no, this scene is totally borked. We need to patch it. I'm not saying that that's not okay, and that's not something that I want in gaming. The problem is that when you release a game like they did last year, and there's just nothing that they originally promised other than content that was being reused from the original game, it's really frustrating. And they're not even the only game studio and game to have this happen. I mean, just at the launch of the Xbox Series X, we had this big catastrophe with Halo Infinite. It went down a very similar path with being half-baked. Game modes weren't being included. Features have been canceled left and right. And it's just, as a gamer, this hurts. This really, really hurts, because I'm at the age where I can remember going to my local game store when I was a kid, and you could go to that game store, you could pick up a game, you could pick up a copy of like Mario Kart Wii, you could put it in your Wii, and it would just play. You didn't have to sit there and install a game. You didn't have to go in and be like, yeah, no, I want to sit there and deal with updates left and right. You could just play your game and not worry about it being a bunch of forked mess. And to be honest, having to go through this with every single game launch that's been happening over the last couple of years, it doesn't make gaming as fun anymore sometimes. And as much as I want to say, I really hope that this changes, clearly it's not going to, because game studios see that people still buy the games despite them releasing them half-baked. So the easiest thing to do is be like, oh yeah, no, don't support a game on launch, don't support a game on launch. But it's like, sometimes for some of these studios, you don't do that, game doesn't sell well. Sequels don't happen. And it's like, for some games, like, imagine if that happened with Breath of the Wild. We would have never have gotten Tears of the Kingdom. If that had happened, we might not have. So it's an unfortunate, sad state that gaming is really in a hole. I mean, we can try and do our best as gamers, but in the end, it's been going on for so long, I honestly don't think that there's going to be an end to it. So hopefully everyone enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure to hit that little like button down there, as well as the subscribe button to see more of my content in the future whenever I go and upload. Also, don't forget to drop a comment with your thoughts on not only the Overwatch 2 news, but also your thoughts on where gaming is going as a whole. I'm very interested to hear what your guys' thoughts are on the matter. Am I overreacting? Is this not a big deal? Or do you agree with me? Is this a really big deal that needs to be addressed? So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you again on our next digital adventure. Bye-bye, guys.